Welcome everyone, Parsha Shavua. We are doing something different tonight. We're going to do a shorter Devar Torah instead of a whole class. And we would love your feedback. So first of all, this is brought to you by Be There Israel and Or Chadash. If you like this format of a 15-minute Devar Torah, so write us, contact us on Facebook, send us an email, and give us your feedback. Tonight we're learning Parsha Tetzaveh, which begins with the following: V'ata Tetzaveh et b'nei Yisrael, v'yikhu alecha shemen zayit zach katit l'maor, la'alot ner tamid. God is speaking to Moshe and says, and you shall command the children of Israel that they take for you, bring to you, pure beaten oil for light, to raise up an everlasting light. So this, of course, is talking about the menorah in the tabernacle. And then, after just a few verses, the Torah switches its focus to the clothes of the priests and the high priest. So we want to look at two things here. First of all, to understand the deeper aspect of what God is giving over to Moshe here. And second is, what's the juxtaposition? Why does this Parsha have to begin with just a few verses about lighting the lights of the menorah, and then go right into the clothes of the Kohen Gadol? What's the connection? So first of all, I learned from Rabbi Ginsburg that the two opening words of this Parsha, V'ata Tetzaveh, equals numerically in Gematria 913, which equals Bereshit, in the beginning. So at first glance, it's like a big question, like, what's the connection between Bereshit and you shall command? And the second thing that Rav Ginsburg points out is that the word V'ata and you, when you switch around the letters, permute the letters, you get the word ta'ava, which means desire. And usually, not always, but usually this word is used in a negative sense. People's taivas, those physical desires that the animal soul runs after. Though there are a number of verses that put this in a good light. Passion. Passion can be very destructive and can be very constructive. So how does all this fit together? So Rav Ginsburg explained the following, that in Jewish thought philosophy, a number of different reasons are given as to why God created the world. One is that God would be known, and everyone will have to pardon me, but in a short Devar Torah, we can't delve into each one of these, but it's brought that God wanted to be known. Another reason is God wanted to give. That it's the nature of God who is good. It says in Ashrei Tov Hashem Lakol, Hashem is good to everything. The nature of goodness wants to give. A third reason is Ein Melech Belo Am. There's no king without a people. And since 100 times a day we say, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech ha'olam. Blessed are you, God, King of the universe. So if there's no one to declare that, then it's as if something is missing. Though we know nothing is missing from God. But then the fourth reason is considered the most enigmatic. It's a midrash that says, Tetzaveh HaKadosh Baruch Hu liyot lo dira b'tachtonim. That God had a passion. Tetzaveh is ta'avah. God had a passion to have a dwelling place in the lower worlds. So this is the connection to Bereshit. In other words, what is the purpose of creation? In the deepest sense, the most mysterious sense, the most paradoxical sense, that God wanted to have a dwelling place in the lower worlds. Not just wanted, he had a passion, he had a desire. So in the Torah, the tabernacle represents the fulfillment of God's purpose of creation, of Bereshit. Because the tabernacle represents a dwelling place for God in this world. That's why in last week's Parsha, Truma, it says, Va'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Make for me a dwelling place, and I will dwell among them. So we see that this verse from last week is the reason for the tabernacle, that there would be a place where God and man could get very close, could interact in the most intimate way. So this explains the connection here between the atah tetzaveh and you will command. But what is God telling Moshe? Light. Have them bring you pure olive oil, that they should have a everlasting light. So if you look in creation, what is the first explicit creation? Is light. Vayomer Elokim yehi or, vayehi or. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. So here, in this Parsha, that is introduced with two words that have the same gematria as Bereshit, we have the commandment to bring light. But now let's connect it to the clothing of the Kohen Gadol and the regular priest. The Torah takes up a lot of time explaining this clothing. So on the deepest level, we're told that there is a concept in Kabbalah and Chassidut called enclothement, hit lab shut, where one thing is enclosed in something else, or something encloses, covers something else. Now the paradox of clothing is, clothing both reveals and hides at the same time. In other words, you look at a person and you get a pretty good idea, even though we say, don't judge a person by their clothing, but nonetheless, there is a truism that we do judge. We do judge.
It's communication.
Yeah, it's a communication. And that's why we wear special clothes for Shabbos and Yom Tov, because it symbolizes a whole change of consciousness. So clothing both hides and reveals. So what did Kabbalah and Chassidut mean by enclothement? So there's a number of different levels of enclothement. And it's all alluded to here in the clothing, the importance of the clothing of the Kohanim. Because the clothing of the Kohanim, the Torah tells us, is for kavod and tiferet, for honor and beauty. Whose honor and beauty? God's. Because the Kohanim are acting as God's representative. And truthfully, at the same time, the Kohanim are also Israel's representative to God. So in both directions, whether the Kohanim are representatives from God to Israel or Israel to God, both of them are for kavod and tiferet, for honor and for beauty. So there are a number of levels of enclothement here. And I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. The first and foremost level is God encloses his infinite being in finite reality. This we see in the name Elohim. Elohim equals 86, which equals the word Hateva, the aspect of nature. In other words, Elohim is enclosed in nature, as it were. The soul is enclosed in the body. Or to say it the opposite, the body encloses the soul. Spirituality is enclosed in physicality. And this we see in science, in the description of the world, is matter encloses energy. Matter is energy, but we don't see it. We look at matter and it seems to be sitting there. This table here is just sitting here. But if you had eyes to see, this table is a whirling, frenetic world of energy. And in fact, it's 99.99.99 pure space. But you look at it, so matter is enclothing energy. So this idea of enclothement is on every level of reality. So what's the juxtaposition here? The juxtaposition is in the secret of light. The way light is described here, it says pure beaten light. In other words, to get oil out of olives, you have to crush them, beat them. And then the oil oozes out. In a metaphor, when you press physicality, what comes out is spirituality. And the paradigm here is out of a physical object called an olive comes light. And that's why the Zohar said an amazing thing, an amazing statement before science had any inkling. The Zohar said physical reality is just light that is thickened. Matter is thickened light. That's what the Zohar said. And that's exactly what science says. Matter is thickened energy. So physical encloses spiritual. Matter encloses energy. So that's the juxtaposition here of light and clothing. Because this is a description of reality on every single level. On every single level. And as a final insight, this Parsha always comes right around Purim. Always comes right around Purim. And we know that one of the main customs of Purim is to dress up in costumes, to clothe ourselves in a different manner than we usually would. And that's what we said in the beginning. Clothing both hides and reveals. How does that work on Purim? So on Purim, we wear a mask. Have you ever gone to a Purim party where you go in and you don't know who half the people are? Like, they are so well hidden, you really don't know who they are. So the clothing is hiding the person. Just like the first clothing came to enclose the nakedness of Adam and Eve. And yet, clothing reveals who we are also. The way a person dresses and carries themselves, that reveals a lot about a person's character. And we're not talking about how expensive the clothes are. That's not what we're talking about. But the way a person wears their clothes tells you a lot. So on Purim, it actually is revealing. Most people psychologically will pick a costume that they want to reveal a certain part of them that the rest of the year they would not have the guts to do, or they don't have the opportunity. So in a sense, you might be totally hidden on Purim, but it's actually revealing something very deep about you. And of course, this comes from the fact that the name of God is not mentioned in the book of Esther. God is hidden in the story. God encloses himself in the politics of the day and manages and directs the whole story. And that's why the sages made a holiday. Because while it was happening, no one could see it. It was so enclosed, it was so hidden. But afterwards, when people had hindsight, so they looked at, oh my gosh, look what just happened here. And they started putting the pieces of the puzzle together and realized God was with us the whole time. He was directing the whole thing. He was moving behind the scenes. So that is a little bit about the clothing and its connection with the light. Everyone should have a joyous, safe, and beautiful Purim, and it should bring us closer to the final redemption.